Sorry about that. Okay. As we have indicated on our flyer and the posts in Connect Cornish, this is a matter that will be voted on at town meeting in March 2025. There's a lengthy document called the Community Power Plan that contains the governing principles behind the program that would guide the town if it votes to adopt community power. Both the Energy Committee and the Select Board have carefully and thoughtfully reviewed this plan and approve of its contents. The vote at town meeting would be to adopt the Community Power Plan and to authorize the Select Board to implement that plan. I'm going to repeat that because this is important. What we'll actually be voting on at town meeting is to adopt the plan, and there's ways to get access to the plan, and I'll tell you about those. We'll be voting to adopt the plan and authorize the Select Board to implement the plan. And the plan itself gives the Select Board two implementation options. So the Select Board makes this decision. A, to partner with CPC&H, or B, to hire a commercial broker. And we'll explain more of that later. The Energy Committee voted unanimously to recommend to the Select Board that we partner with CPC&H, and I can go into the reasons for that later. Whether the Select Board chooses to use a commercial broker or partner with CPC&H, all of the governing principles are the same and are contained in the same plan. This is a big decision for the town, and the goal of the Energy Committee, through these public hearings and other resources, is to provide the best information we can to facilitate the townspeople in making an informed decision at town meeting. On that note, I want to remind everyone that there is a webpage on the town website called Community Power Information, which contains a wealth of information, including a copy of the plan, a brief summary of the plan, a draft of the proposed warrant article, and frequently asked questions. This web page is being continuously updated. I hope you will avail yourselves of this resource over the next few months before town meeting. I want to thank Heidi Jarzma for all her technical help with setting up that web page. In addition, if you ever have any questions between now and town meeting, please feel free to email me. My email address is available in the Connect Cornish postings and on the Energy Committee webpage, which is a different webpage from the Community Power Information page. And you can also just ask me how to do my email address. I would like to thank the Select Board for all the time and thought they have put into this issue. We have not all been in agreement on everything about community power, but I know that each Select Board member only has the best interests of the town in mind in all their decisions, not just about this, and I truly appreciate all the unrecognized and thankless time, energy, and concern they give to this town. I'd also like to thank my Energy Committee members, past and present, for all their hard work on this. And I'm very grateful to CPC&H and specifically Andrew Hatch, who has put in countless hours to help us understand all the facets that go into community power and who has been extremely patient with my inquiries. I would like to now turn the meeting over to Andrew Hatch, who will explain what community power is, what it would mean for Cornish to adopt it, and also he will tell us more about CPC&H, the organization he works for. Andrew will talk for about 20-30 minutes, and then we'll open the meeting up for questions. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen.
Thanks, John. I want to do a say. I'm just going to hand both guys one of these cards, and this will just explain a little bit when I do this break. Hopefully, folks can see the presentation on the slide, but I do have some copies of the slide presentation. So I have about a dozen, so I could offer them up to folks to share and follow along with the slide. Thank you everybody for coming. As Joanna said, I'm Andrew Hatch. I'm the engagement manager for CPC&H, and I do a lot of presentations around the state. We got in Northumberland the night before last, so we are genuinely covering all points of the compass. And as you can see in the display poster on the left-hand side here, have been continuing to grow. I think you mentioned 63. I think we're actually hit 66 now in Northumberland and Meredith. And just today, the town of Conway joined the coalition. And they're in the same sort of status as Cornish is. So why I'm here today is the first of two public hearings that are required in order for community power to move forward under the RSA, under the rules that have been set by the legislature and the Public Utilities Commission. I will point you to something that Joanna hadn't noticed before I came in tonight. This is your new Cornish Community Power logo. I think that's exciting. Hopefully you like it. And as we said, there's going to be a presentation again on Tuesday, December the 3rd. So please let your colleagues and neighbours know all about that. You could just go to the next slide, please, Joanna. So firstly, I'd just like to explain a little bit more about what is community power. As Joanna said, it was created through the RSA 53E in 2019 and through conversations with legislators, amended to permit what is on the table tonight, which is an opt-out program. The reason an opt-out program is necessary and beneficial is that it provides folks with the opportunity to save money on their electricity, on the supply side of their electricity, without having to take action. We have all been able to do this for over 20 years since deregulation. Back in the late 90s, the first conversations about deregulation in New Hampshire were taken. And in fact, New Hampshire was the first state in the Union to take these steps to change the way that the utilities operated in the state. And as that law was updated, the intention was to bring greater choice to who provides your power, with the intention that that would drive down through competition the cost of power. The utilities are what we call distribution utilities, and their only role under deregulation and their only means of income and profit is to providing the power. They can't make the power through power stations, and they can't profit from the provision of electricity. Now, in Cornish, there are 3 utilities serving different parts of Cornish, and I'd be interested to know who in the room is with Eversource? Good proportion. Any Liberty folks? And last but not least, the co-op. Any co-op folks? Great. Thank you very much. So we have representation from all the 3 utilities serving Cornish. And also, just for interest, does anybody have a third-party provider that they don't actually use the default power of your utility? The lady in the back there. Okay. And another person here. And then finally, who has any form of net metering, solar panels or other things? A good representation there. So I'm going to touch on some of those categories, and they'll be important, and you'll understand why shortly. But this slide just explains that we're all talking about one side of your electricity bill, the energy supply side. So what's happened over time is that a majority of ratepayers, residential and small commercial, haven't taken the opportunity to buy into the choice that's out there and continue to remain a default customer of the utilities. This wasn't the vision, and the idea was that we would come to town, we would connect with the utility who served us. We have no choice on who that utility is, but then that utility would give us an account number. We would be put on default power until such time as we went out and found our provider of choice. but for a variety of reasons, and one of them being that it requires some action, some research, and quite a lot of figuring out and then oversight on the part of the participant to benefit from a third party, folks really haven't done that in large numbers. The utility company under community power continues to provide the power. They're responsible for the poles and the wires. If there's an outage, you would call your utility to get you back online. And they also take care of the billing. So a lot of things about community power really don't change. There are a number of other value-added benefits to community power other than saving money. But the underpinning offering is that we are in the business to try to keep the cost of electricity as low as possible in the state for all our members and ratepayers. So you can switch in and out of community power at will. There is no cost. The only delay is in the time it takes for the utility to update their database. So every time they do a meter reading every month, it may take a week or two before your wishes are honored, but you can move in and out of the program at will, at no cost. And the only revenues, the only cost that, the revenues that come from community power is what manages and pays for the program. So there are no costs to the town of Cornish. There's no cost to ratepayers who are not participating. Next slide, please. I've touched on this already, but just to reiterate, what we're talking about is local control. One of the things I haven't explained is that what the coalition also offers is the opportunity for folks to access higher levels of renewable power. So what would happen if Cornish adopted community power is you would be automatically enrolled with a basic offering if you were on default power already. If you were with a third-party supplier, if you were currently on net metering, if you were not part of the default program, you would have to opt in, and you could opt into the program. But the main focus is the folks who are already on default power, the vast majority of people in the town of Cornish. While we've been working on your electric aggregation plan, we've done some analysis of the total number of accounts in Cornish, and about 79 to 85%, depending upon which utility of folks are enrolled in default power. So there's a large proportion of the town that would be automatically enrolled if this moves forward. The clean energy concept is bigger than just the opportunity to opt up to a higher level of renewable on your energy bill. And I'll come back to a few ideas of where the coalition is going at the end of this presentation. The resilience and innovation piece is all about offering folks the opportunity to access technology that exists, but is not currently made available to you by the utilities. A good example of this, and it is offered in some cases by the New Hampshire Electric Co-op, is time of use rates. The opportunity to have a meter that will detect when in the day you're using power. As many of you know, the cost of power fluctuates all the time. While I'll be talking to you, the cost of power will have changed many, many times. And so time of use rates allow people to manage how they use their electricity and to use it as a time when the costs can be lower, rather than just one fixed cost across all 24 hours. But there's a great number of other things that are coming along with that in terms of technology that we want to help folks to leverage. And the most important things on this slide, Cornish Community Power will only launch if it is able to initially offer residential default rates that are lower than those offered by the default utility service. That is part of the arrangement through the law. The rates are and must be lower than the prevailing rates of the utilities at all. Next slide, please. So this is just a summary slide. I've pretty much hit all these points. I don't need to keep repeating myself, but the important things up here, bear in mind, is community power is voluntary. Even if it's an opt-out program, we try and make it as easy as possible. If people do not want to participate for whatever reason, we will do everything we can to make it simple for them to just step out of the program. Over time, and we've been operating now for over 18 months, we have seen an average of less than 2% of folks opting out of the program. And in fact, more than 3% of folks opting into the program. So there's a net gain there. So I think once people get comfortable with it, it works for everybody. It says customers shopping with the third-party suppliers would remain with their third-party supplier. The reason for that is we don't know what your contract is. You may have some form of term, and there may be some early termination fee. It would be down to those individuals to understand what the prevailing rates of the utility of the coalition were, and if they wish to opt into the program, they could do so. And I'll explain how we make that as simple as possible in a moment. And finally, it is completely self-funded, so there is no taxes, there's no expense, and in fact, there is no liability to the town of Cornish to participate in this program. Next slide. So here's a chart which is similar to what I just gave you in the handout. Over on the right-hand side, you can see the rates that are currently in force. Many of you are probably aware, but every 6 months, the utilities set their rates. So we're going to have a rate setting period next month in December. The rates that will start on the 1st of February and run through to the 31st of July. And then in June, the rates will be set for August through to January the 31st. So that's the period we're in right now. The blue line along the bottom is what the current basic default rate for most of our members is today, 8.6 cents. So if you're an Eversource customer, you'll be saving roughly 10 cents, 2 cents a kilowatt hour, and potentially that would mean maybe $10, $12 a month. The estimates of the cost of supply are based upon 650 kilowatt hours a month. It's just a standard, it's an average. Everybody's consumption is different. You would have to look at your bill to figure out how you compare with that. If you were with Liberty, you're saving a little bit more money than Eversource. If you're with the co-op, there isn't a great saving in this current rate period. If we went back to the previous rate period, you would find that Eversource's rates were very close to those of the coalition, and the rates for the co-op were closer to Liberty's. It varies every 6 months. We choose to track our rates to those of the utilities for the simple reason that it's apples and apples. I will mention in a minute about other optional rate products that differ from that, but we will continue to maintain this rate card, and this will be the rate card that folks have default opted into. The green rates above the blue one there, they're the higher levels of renewable energy. They, as you can see, cost a little bit more, but what you're doing there is supporting the development of renewable power in New Hampshire and in New England. The coalition buys what we call renewable energy certificates, RECs, to satisfy the higher level of renewable energy in the mix. In the real world, the electrons that come down the wires into your home don't know what color they are. They don't know where they were produced. They could come from a dirty coal-powered power station or a windmill. It doesn't matter. So what we have to do in terms of greening up the grid, if you will, is to use this concept of renewable energy certificates. When we get to Q&A, I'd be happy to get into that in more detail. But I just wanted you to know that the coalition is looking to use that for the reasons it's intended, not to buy renewable energy certificates from out of state or out of region that really don't benefit the whole picture of local renewables. On the left, it's what I was talking about in terms of ease of access. What Cornish will have when it launches would be its own dedicated website that sits at communitypowernh.gov, where all of the information is accessible for folks and is updated regularly. if people are comfortable with using the internet and accessing it through that, that's the portal that we prefer folks to get in touch. However, we have customer service center who are active during working day hours at an 800 number. You can also email the coalition. There's another slide that has that. And all you need is your utility account number. And if you wish to opt up, opt down, opt out, or opt in, it's as simple as that. Just get in touch. You're always free to choose the power from the utility or from another third party, as I said before. Next slide, please. So, the notification process is just taking a little step further in assuming that Cornish had decided to launch community power. You would be put onto a track for a scheduled launch. So in the last, in this year, we've launched 3 times. We've launched in March, in June, and just in October. And the fastest way that Cornish could launch would be if it got through town meeting and then would be on track to launch next June 2025. But that's the fastest way, but it may not be the right track for Cornish. I'm just making the point that once that is decided, then we would start to get the information that we need to get everybody's data from the utilities and set a launch up. If it was going to be the 1st of June, then we would need to send out notices in the previous, we need to have at least 30 days notice before we launch a community. So in fact, not in May, but in late April, you would receive a letter similar to the one on the right-hand side that is actually a 4-page explanation of what's going to happen. And you will have an invitation that within 15 days of that letter going out, you would come to a public information session like this, and we would have all your questions answered and make sure that everybody is absolutely clear on what's going on and what your options are. That's pretty much what that slide's all about. Next slide, please. So like I said before, a lot of things don't change, and one of the things is your utility bill. Other than where you can see in this Eversource example, there is a supplier line which would say Cornish Community Power, and if it was happening now at 8.6 cents, that's the only difference. So you would be saving money on that line. I regret that we have no influence over the cost of delivery, a cost of distribution. Certainly with Eversource, I know you would be aware that your rates have just gone up a bit, and they have been signaled that they're going to rise again over the next year or two quite significantly. The utilities are responsible for that. They have to submit their requests to the Public Utilities Commission, and it's the Public Utilities Commission that authorizes any of these rate increases. But that side of the equation isn't where we're at in community power, just the supply side. The only way you can really help yourself is by reducing your overall use of electricity, because every single one of these line items is multiplied by those kilowatt hours that you use. So energy efficiency is a way to drive down both sides of the bill. And energy efficiency is one of the objectives of many of our members to help to develop programs to support their ratepayers in reducing their overall energy costs. Next slide, please. Oh, and here's an example from Liberty. Actually, if you just go back, you can see there are some different ways. I mean, we don't have control over how the utilities express themselves on their bills. So with Liberty, it just says something in additional messages, you've chosen community power, but it doesn't explain it down there. So just bear in mind that depending on your utility, it's going to look a little differently, but the whole concept still applies across all the utilities. So we're in a process now of implementation. Your select board has voted to join the coalition. It's a non-binding commitment, but what it does do is avail the town of Cornish with the resources and experience of the coalition to help you along the way. Your committee has been established, and here we are today having a public hearing about the electric aggregation plan. And as Joanne said, the next steps after these two meetings would actually be to submit a final version of your plan to the Public Utilities Commission for their approval, and simultaneously move forward to town meeting for a warrant article. If the Public Utilities Commission approve your plan, and you, the voters, the legislative body of Cornish, approve to move forward and approve your plan, then you're on deck to launch. So, what is the electric aggregation plan? It is a mandatory requirement of RSA 53E. So what we do is provide a draft plan that communities can then use to develop and customize for their own community. They don't have to write it from scratch. Your friends and neighbors in Plainfield was one of the launch group of 12 communities that did an awful lot of hard work 2 or 3 years ago to start to craft these plans. And we've combined the information and the best practices within those plans and created something that we know will pass muster with the Public Utilities Commission, and all of the regulatory and mandatory documentation is all in there. But the goals and objectives, importantly, are those of the Town of Cornish. The Community Power Coalition is, I like to describe it, the glue that holds together all of the separate communities. But it's your community power. We help you, but we don't dictate to you what that means. Some communities take a very simplistic view to community power. Save folks money and call it good. And if that's what Cornish chose to do, it would be fine. There are other communities that have very progressive ideas about how to develop this in many different ways. And all options between that basic offering and those other ideas are on the table. So basically, we're just going through the process and meeting the obligations, but also giving you a roadmap that's something that you and your energy committee will continue to review over time. These slides are pretty dry. You can all read that. I don't need to go through it in detail. But like I said, the goals and objectives and everything in the chapters, the appendices just talks about the coalition, but it also talks about things like net metering and how we manage customer data. Privacy is extremely important. Your data would not be shared with your local energy committee. We keep a very strong separation between customer data and the operations of our members, so that nothing inappropriate can happen with folks' information and data. In fact, we would not do anything but send you that enrollment letter. We won't follow up. We don't have your emails. We're not going to be marketing to you or selling your information to other entities. So the purpose of the plan is to lay it all out, the governance, the rules, how we operate, and it commits the town to meet those mandatory requirements of providing universal access and reliability and meeting the basic standards as set by the Public Utilities Commission. The plan also gets into details about things like net metering. I'll touch on net metering right now. If the law that is in place was properly adhered to by the utilities, right now, we would be able to serve folks on net metering. Unfortunately, the utilities have not been able to get into compliance by providing the necessary data. It's not just the coalition, it's any third-party provider of power cannot get the data it needs to give the folks who get net metering credits that reimbursement. So we do not automatically enroll people on net metering. That does not mean that certain people on net metering can't benefit from joining the coalition. But just like those third-party supplier folks, we would need to have a one-on-one conversation to understand their circumstance. It is not the intention of the coalition to inadvertently enroll people at a disadvantage to them. So we try to encourage them to talk to us directly. Folks who are on electric assistance programs, subsidized electric programs, are eligible to join and benefit from the lower cost of power. Other than that, the plan does not set in motion any obligation to the town. And again, There are no financial commitments. In fact, the town, by the rules of the law, can't expend any significant amount of money on developing, launching, and managing community power. We take the administrative burden and the costs, and we recoup those costs through the revenues received by the participating companies. So there's just a couple of brief slides about the coalition, kind of repetitious. Here's the real deal. But we have been moving fast. We organized as a non-profit in 2021. It took the Public Utilities Commission over a year to get the rules in place. So the first communities that launched were in April of last year. And since April of last year, in just that first year till April of this year, over $14 million in customer savings. And what I mean by that was how much the people that paid the bills through the coalition saved over how much they would have paid if they'd stayed with their existing utility. And we've just launched our October group, and that brought us up to 175,000 customers. And actually, we're up to almost 40% of the population of New Hampshire is represented right now. So very exciting and very fast moving. That's representing over $100 million in revenue. Next. And this could never have been done without the passion and advocacy of the volunteers and the folks from all of the communities participating in community power. Until just over a year ago, we had no staff. Everything was done by volunteers and the folks who were committed to launch community power. Our board is an elected board, and 1/3 of it is up for re-election every year, and indeed all of our committees. We would encourage participation from the town of Cornish in all of these boards and committees, because that is the lifeblood of the coalition. Every town and city has, every member has one vote. So it doesn't matter whether you're a small town or a large city, you have no more influence. And so that, I think, is very beneficial for many of our smaller communities, that they have representation at the highest level. We encourage people to sit in on all of our meetings. We are not just a regular non-profit, we are a government instrumentality, which means that we're subject to right-to-know laws. All of our budgets, our performance, our contracts, and our policies are available on our website for public scrutiny. And all of our meetings are open to public participation. We have staff now. Brian Cowland joined us from the New Hampshire Electric Co-op. Brian has over 30 years experience in utilities, both here and in the state of Vermont, and is extremely experienced in power procurement. And we have a whole group of people supporting him. And then underpinning the operation are experienced professional third-party providers that can give us the bandwidth for customer service, the analytical services that we need to procure power at the most advantageous rates. That's what it's all about, because people ask me, well, how can you save money? Well, the answer is, A, like I said at the beginning, the utilities cannot profit from procuring power, and nor can they buy market on the market. They have to procure power on a date certain twice a year. Sometimes that's a good date. Sometimes, like December of 2022, it's a very bad day. That was when the power prices went through the roof because of the cost of natural gas and the new war in Ukraine. You were stuck with 20 cents plus a kilowatt hour for a whole 6 months, because that was the way it happened that time. Rates have come right down since then and have been pretty stable. This chart here shows you that red line is how the coalition has maintained a discount to all of the utilities since its inception, and we hope and plan to continue to do that. And that's the presentation, and I would be happy to open up the conversation and answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Okay, so yeah.
slide that has the blue line that talks about the rate.
Going to be a couple going back. The rates, like
The
on,
basic rate,
yeah, so on that little handout, yeah.
it's, the South Cornish and the Community Power Coalition, would be a choice, and you paying 8.6 cents, for the kilowatt. That this doesn't mean that everybody in Cornish would be paying that basic rate, or do people choose among the
Well,
choices?
I understand your question. They would be automatically enrolled at that lowest rate. So they wouldn't have to take any action, assuming that they were receiving the default power from the utility. So most folks would be automatically enrolled at 8.6. Anybody that wanted to have a higher level of renewables would have to get in touch and opt up. And just to reiterate, every 6 months this will change. So there's going to be a new card available for the 1st of February. So before Cornish embarks upon this, you'll know what the rates are going to be from February through July, which will be that window when you'll have town meeting and the opportunity to consider a launch in June. The rates will certainly change. We hope that we will continue to maintain the discounts against the prevailing rates, but it will only be once every 6 months. We procure power all the time, but we set the rates every 6 months in lockstep with the utility. Does that help you to answer the question? Okay.
I just want to add something, if I may. So the plan requires that any town that joins a community power will not launch unless the rates are lower than the other utilities. But that's only about launching. It doesn't extend that requirement to subsequent rate settings. But as the CPCNH has shown, I mean, the goal is to provide as competitive rates as possible. And so far, the coalition has succeeded in being less than delivering lower prices than all the utilities. And do you want to talk about the reserve fund?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for reminding me about that. As I said, we're a non-profit, meaning that obviously we use our income in a different way to a for-profit company. The majority of that 8.6 is the cost of procuring the power. Then there's a slice that's the cost of maintaining the coalition. It's roughly it's in single-digit percentages of the total cost of the rate. It's actually going down because as we grow and we get more ratepayers, it's not exponential. We don't expand the coalition, we just get more revenue. And so actually the percentage of the total income goes down. And so I'm just talking about rough numbers. If we said, 85% of this 8.6 cents was to do with power procurement and 5% was to do with maintaining the cost of the coalition, then there would be 10% left. Well, that 10% isn't banked as profit, it's actually booked as what we call community reserves. And it's for the benefit of all our members, but it is accounted for by each individual community. And it's proportionate to the amount of overall electrical load that this community uses compared to everybody. So it's each little piece of the pie is a small slice, but it is accounted for. So Cornish would start to accrue reserves. And these reserves have a variety of benefits and reasons for existing. The principal one is to build the credit worthiness of the coalition on behalf of all its members. And why I mean that, what I mean by that is that we need to have enough cash on hand to weather any future storm. And that's probably literal and metaphorical in terms of the future. But one of the really interesting things is right now, we have to do third-party providers to buy the power. We can't buy it direct from the New England grid. And the reason for that is that we're not big enough with enough assets to do that. But once we get to that critical point, we can cut out a lot of these middle parties, buy power at more advantageous rates, and pass those on to our members. So that's job one in terms of reserves. But going back to something that bad happened, back in December, and we were all saddled with very high rates for 6 months. If that were to occur again, there are provisions that our board of directors could expend some of those reserves to tamp down the shock of those rate increases. That's an example of how we could use reserves. But that's never been done up to now, and not a primary objective. It's just a backup, a backstop if we need it. So hopefully that explains it a little bit. And we have come in, we do flex a bit, but I mean, we've said we achieved about $10 million of reserves earlier this year. It backed off to about 8.6 because we've launched all of these communities in red, and the cost of those haven't yet been recovered from the revenues we're getting from those rate payers, but over time that will settle out.
Yes.
My question is, assuming Cornish joins and something goes wrong, is there a way to get out? What's an escape hatch if you want to get out of the program? It's for the town.
I'm the Andrew Hatch. I'll tell you what the escape hatch is. So, yeah, I mean, it's important to understand. There is a termination clause in the contracts that your board of selectmen would enter into. Where we are today, it's no harm, no foul. If Cornish decided to take a different course of action, to step away from the coalition, any expenses that have been accrued to get to this sort of point are all absorbed by the coalition. Nothing to concern itself. And that offering continues up to the date when Cornish, we procure power on behalf of the town of Cornish. So your selectmen would be at a meeting. In fact, we had one today for the folks that are going to launch in March, and it's called our risk management meeting. And that is the day when it's a go, no go. And it's like last call, are you in? And when you say you're in, we procure power for Cornish. Now, one of the cornerstones of Community Power's operating rules is that we do not burden one community with the actions of another. So we must make sure there are protections in our rules of exit to make sure that if Cornish move forward, launch Community Power, for some reason got together and said we want out, that we would, as a coalition, all our other members would be, if you will, holding the bag of all of this energy that we've procured for Cornish, and we can't do anything with it. So what actually happens is that in the contract, it says Cornish needs to provide notice to the coalition through its select board of its intention to exit. On that day, our CEO would acknowledge receipt of that notice, and you, Cornish, would have up to, hold on, 36 months to exit the coalition in an orderly fashion. Now, in reality, the vast majority of those power contracts that have been procured on behalf of Cornish are much, much shorter. They're in months. So a calculation would be done to say, how can we unwind those contracts for Cornish? And how much has Cornish accrued of those reserves? And do the math. And we'll say, if you want to cash in your reserves and we sell all your contracts, it will require you to stay engaged with the coalition for this length of time, this number of probably months. And if you stayed the course, and just allowed everything to settle out, there would be no impact to the town of Cornish. The only impact would be, and I don't want to be flippant about this, say, well, we don't want to do this anymore, we'll walk out the door. We can't have that happen for obvious reasons. It's called an orderly exit. But we would do everything we could to unwind those contracts. And it could honestly be a good time to step away, just the way that power contracts were trending. We might be able to sell your contracts at a profit. I don't know. But because it's an evergreen contract, not a fixed term contract, it's a little difficult to be more specific than that. We just had to set the rules to say 36 months is the longest time you'd be on the hook for anything. In the world that we live in, the vast majority of your obligations would be much, much shorter. And as soon as we can unwind them, and at whatever cost, you'd be off hook. At the same time, don't forget that if this has been caused by some unfortunate circumstance that the coalition has been unable to meet its commitment to keep costs lower than the cost of the utility, and folks don't want to remain in, everybody in Cornish can, in and of themselves, opt out at any time. So don't feel that, you as individuals have to be stuck with the program, if you will. That's a completely optional and separate conversation. But the town as a unit would have to make this orderly exit. Was that helpful? It's never happened before. I hope it will never happen. But we've thought a lot about this. And believe me, I always get these questions, plus all of the other doomsday scenarios. So bring them on. I'll do my best to answer.
Good, sure. That's sounds like a good, well thought out plan. We could be a couple towns that's trying to exit with somebody else. And so, you don't want to feel that's going to be a clarity.
Right. And I mean, I'm hesitant to get sort of too over my skis, but this is just the basic offering. In the last month, we've just introduced some really interesting new products and ideas. And it'll just give you a flavor of where the coalition is hoping to head. One is that we've introduced an annual rate for commercial and municipal customers, because there's two ironies about all this. A majority of the communities that launch, and all the energy committees, are all populated by people with solar power, myself included. And none of us have been able to benefit from this because of the problems with the Public Utilities Commission, or many of us have. That's been super frustrating, and I'll explain why we're trying to change all that in a moment. But the other thing was our municipalities themselves were served typically on a contract with a broker who was offering them a longer term than this 6-month volatility, because the town of Cornish needs to have a budget that gets approved at town meeting, and you need certainty about how much your energy is going to cost for at least a year. So we've just introduced an annual rate. The first annual rate will go January to December. And because some communities, I don't know about Cornish, are you on a calendar year or a fiscal year? I don't know if anybody's here from the town. Calendar year. Okay, great. But some communities run fiscal and they run from July to June. So we'll be doing another rate to meet that schedule. And again, with our flexibility in mind, it's not a contract, you're not stuck with it. You don't have to start on January 1 and run the distance to December 31st. But all municipalities, 8.9 cents. We have had a rush of communities jumping on that offering. It's very exciting, certainly for us, because we want to serve as many of our ratepayers within our member community. The second thing is to do with the renewable energy. If you have a solar array, many people don't know that they have a second small but worthwhile source of revenue through those things I was talking about earlier, renewable energy certificates, RECs. Many solar developers, because it's not really advantageous to them, it's just another thing to deal with, don't really talk about the fact that you can sell the power that you produce in a renewable energy certificate. One REC is 1 megawatt hour. It's as simple as that, but it varies in value. And so for something with a small array, it's not a whole hill of beans, but I get 4 checks a year, and I might see on mine $100 to $120 a year. But hey, that's a whole month of my electricity, my old electric bill, so it's worth having. But the little secret the utilities don't want you to know is that if you don't know about this, they do. And they take all of the wrecks that you don't claim and sweep them off and use it for their compliance payment. They say we're off the hook for a large amount of money and a large amount of renewable generation. I've got some more slides in there if you want to get weedy about it, but it really is unfortunate. And we are launching a rec aggregation. We have launched a rec aggregation service that we're just rolling out right now. And we've also just announced our first local partnership with a solar development in one of our member communities that will be selling a sort of group net metering access to. And it's part of where we're going. Right now, we have to procure power on the open market, and it's just the same for everybody. But we would like to change that. We would like New Hampshire to have more local generation and more independence and more ability to look after our own interests without being dependent on external forces. And that's something in the big picture that we're very committed to at the coalition. We have somebody who's in charge of legislative and regulatory affairs, Dina Dennis. She intervenes at the Public Utilities Commission, talks to folks at the legislature, and represents ratepayers. Up to now, the lobbyists have been from the utilities. They have gotten what they want at the expense of the ratepayers. We're trying to level the playing field and work with all our communities to have a voice and to change
them. Since most of you don't know me, I've been part of Cornish for 4.5 years now. My name's Kevin Noble, and by way of background, about 30 years ago, I started working as an energy engineer. So I know a little bit about this world. I have some specific questions, but you brought up the RECs, Andrew, and so the REC sweeping thing, that's got to be fixed by essentially either the PUC or the legislature, right?
Well, I guess they could outlaw it, but I think the better thing is to inform the public and to give the public a easy method to monetize those RECs and not allow them to sit there and get swept by the utilities. That's what we're trying to do.
I mean, it sounds like you made, what, 3 or 4 RECs last year. And if you had not been able to get those, that would have been free RECs bought by your utility, not bought by your utility, swept,
Credited by the utility at their
and used to meet the what is it, the RPS, renewable power goals. So I want to talk a little bit about the RECs and what renewable energy really means. And hopefully, Andrew, you correct me if I'm incorrect here. But a REC is generated when you generate a megawatt hour of power, and it then can be sold or traded, can only be ultimately used once, but that megawatt hour of power can be generated at any time. And that REC can be used generally within, I'm guessing, equal. And it's a fungible market. I called the PUC the other day, and they don't track the price of RECs. Is that something you would consider lobbying for? Disclosure of REC pricing in New Hampshire?
Oh goodness, you've opened up a very large rabbit hole there.
Well, I want to keep everybody here all night.
The short answer is yes. Another answer to one of the things is, okay, there's about 7 places that people who know about RECs can go to to have folks pay them for their recs, their rec
Right.
aggregators. So we've set up a rec aggregation service to compete with those largely out-of-state actors who profit from the lack of understanding. There's one who, you can mention the name, I'm not, but you'll know who I'm talking about, has set the price of a rec at $27 for the last 10 or 15 years. And I'm actually signed up with them until I get onto the coalition's rate. And you just get your money, and they hope you are not upset enough to research it and find out that that's not the only option. You could make a lot more money if you sign another one of their contracts. But that's the kind of stuff that's going on. And it matters. And we definitely, we would like you to be involved in this advocacy. So again, folks, don't, we can't use your data, but if you're interested in the coalition and these kind of issues, please sign up. Just on the, send us your email. You can go to info@cpcnh.org and just sign up. We will send you updates about legislative affairs and all the stuff that's going on.
Okay, I'll talk to you about that later.
Please.
Now, implied in this, with the various clean power options, is a rec price with your overhead of about $45. And there are like 5 classes and subclasses of recs. So but the important thing to remember is for those of us who want to be as green as possible, that because a rec is not time dependent, the actual power, now, buying green power does encourage investment in renewable energy. No question about that. But until we develop this world, a cost-effective means of storing electric energy, we're still cycling up and down fossil fuel plants in order to provide the energy when the renewable sources, the majority of which are intermittent, being solar and wind, are not available.
If you like this slide, this is the distributed DERs. So we should get together after.
But that works with the sunshine. And it reduces transmission loss.
Yeah, and when the wind's blowing.
That's a good thing.
I don't disagree with you, but this is an area, and as I said to Joanna, I like to get folks to the point of like the presentation. You understand what the offering is with Cornish. I'll go as deep as anybody wants to go in some of this stuff, but I know for many people this is a little deep. What I want to say is this is an important slide. Those green numbers, how do we do it? We spent $2.2 million on satisfying the obligations that we had signed, our ratepayers had signed us up for by opting up to a higher level of renewables. You'll see all the NHs in here. That's because we have made a commitment to local recs. You can buy recs from Texas or the Midwest for nothing. And when you go to some of the third-party suppliers who will give you 100% green energy for a very, very low price, that's what they're doing.
They're buying $4 recs out of Iowa or something.
Exactly.
Yes.
But we don't do that because
Yeah.
that's not what it's there for,
Yeah.
and we don't believe it's the
And
right thing
that's
to do.
admirable.
And here-
Admirable. No question about that.
We have to be at 24.3% here by law. Next year, that level will go up to 25.2%.
Yes.
And will flatline unless the legislature does something. But your 25.2, the devil's in the detail. What happens every year afterwards is our lovely Department of Energy gets together and figures out how all of these rec classes work. And the rec sweeping bit turned 2023's requirement of 23.4% down to 15.9. That's the difference that's just largely to do with this rec sweeping business. So it is just making a mockery of even the best intentions of our legislature right now. And this is the kind of stuff that we're shining a light on and trying to
And I
change.
think there was close to $1 million in purchases of APCs in that year too.
No doubt.
Which is, now, the PUC has set a rate, and it depends on the class. But if a utility can't or doesn't buy all the RECs they buy, they have to pay the penalty, which the PUC allegedly invests in renewable
Well,
products.
that's the Renewable Energy Fund, yeah.
Yeah, the renewable energy fund, but that's not the power being purchased. That is an alternative, and I trust that the coalition will never buy an APC because it's against what should believe.
We won't, and, again, I can only encourage you to get involved. You know, our RLAC, which is Regulatory and Legislative Affairs Committee, meets once a month. You know, we're gonna have a new, legislative season, as you probably know. There's typically over 1,000 bills that are starting to get assembled now for the new legislature. We are monitoring all of that and making sure that, you know, some of these bills that have innocuous sort of names, but they've got some poison in there. We're keeping an eye on all of that, making sure that there isn't any adverse effect for the energy markets. But it's not a level playing field. It never will be, and we'll always be fighting a rearguard action. But at last, we've got a voice for ratepayers and not for investor-owned utilities taking money out of our state and filling their pockets of their shareholders.
And
Excuse me, forgive me. I want to give other people a chance to ask questions if you don't mind. Okay. Any other questions at this time? Yes.
I'm just wondering if this vote at town meeting, is that gonna be a floor vote, or will that be a ballot vote? Or don't you know? Yeah,
We haven't made the warrant yet, but I believe it would be a floor vote unless someone wanted to have it.
What is
what's
the thought?
that take? 5 people requesting the ballot?
More than that,
But it won't be an official ballot.
Okay.
An official ballot is where you vote for town officers.
Okay.
It will be voted on the floor either by show of hands or paper ballot. But you will have to be there to vote. Very good question.
thank you.
That is a good question.
Yeah.
So the December 3rd public hearing, will that be the same information?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any updates, I'll add it on, but it's basically the same thing. You know, the PUC makes it clear that, you know, it's important that we have public input, and we interpret their requirements as being a minimum of 2 public hearings. It's not to suggest that communities can't do more outreach, and, you know, we would be there to support you between now and town meeting in any other forum that you choose to do. But we will have a second formal hearing that goes through the mandatory requirements and explains the process again. And I'm sure if it's been so much fun this time, you'll come back for another dose, right?
The Energy Committee is thinking of having an informational meeting closer to town meeting, but we haven't completely decided on that yet. But it wouldn't be a public hearing. It would be just like an information. Yes.
So you mentioned early on in your presentation that people opt in and out.
Yeah.
All that. Well, why do people do that?
Well, as I say, you know, what happens at the beginning, you know, is there are certain folks that just object to the concept of being enrolled in anything, even if it saves them money, and they step out. Then the folks who are opting in are a combination of the people who have been on third-party supply. As I said, I mean, typically, you know, in Cornish, we're talking about a total of 123 customers out of 956. So, you know, a significant percentage who are on a third-party supplier across commercial and residential. It's actually maybe up to 20% on commercial customers by the look at in Eversource, and much lower at the co-op, because the co-op typically is just residential, and then about 12% of Liberty's customers. So there's a good number of those there that would jump in. So that's typically that. And then once communities launched, communities tend to particularly with an active energy committee like Cornish, do, you know, their opt-up campaigns. So they're trying to get people to move up to a higher level of renewables. So that's where people would get in touch and move up to, you know, we've had the most successful ones get up to 4 or 5% of total participants moving up. You know, but we're only just getting started, and hopefully that'll be more and more as people, you know, get the word, you know, about going to, you know, the old home days and things like that, and tabling and things is what we hope that your proactive committee. I mean, the Cornish Energy Committee is commendable. I mean, I rarely see so much deep thought, commitment, and expertise at those sort of meetings. These guys have, I assure you, been exhaustive in their analysis of this, haven't they, Joanna? Yes. So that's good. Yes, sir.
I'm a New Hampshire electric customer,
Yeah.
and we moved to town in the 40s to start a farm. And New Hampshire Electric has served us well. They are a farmers co-op that runs out through the pucker brush.
Yeah.
And they grew with the farm.
Yeah.
And I got to the point where we were paying $1,000 a month for the farm grew and the co-op grew. Being a co-op, we've been starting to get money back from them. So what happens to that money?
Well, the co-op is a non-profit, so they aren't an investor-owned utility, but they are a distribution utility that can only profit from the provision of the distribution, the poles and the wires. So the piece on their bill is where their money comes from. The reimbursement of that is probably what we're talking about. They again can't profit from procurement of power. So, you know, I'm often asked, and I personally, when I first started this, was concerned that the last thing we want to do is destabilize the co-op. The co-op is an incredible asset to New Hampshire, and what we have letters from the co-op assuring members of our communities that this is the case, that there is no adverse effect to the co-op by opting in to community power. They will say in their statements, in fact, the co-op was the first to promote consumer choice on supply in the state and are fully behind this program. Now, they do have the opportunity to procure power in a more similar fashion to the coalition than the utilities, because they're not restricted to that one date on the calendar. And that's why over time they have actually performed better than most of the other utilities most of the time. But it isn't at a profit. It's again a little bit of a serving our customers and doing the right thing attitude rather than making money on it. It's going to be interesting over time to see how things roll out. And in fact, some of our communities chose not to enroll the co-op and just to the investor-owned utilities into an opt-out program and make the whole co-op group an optional opt-in. And that could happen in Cornish. You could make that decision. There's no reason why that couldn't exist. But, you know, we intend to try to maintain a discount against all the utilities, including the co-op, and save folks money, but not at the cost of destabilizing the co-op.
Doesn't the co-op produce energy with a windmill?
I would be the wrong person to answer this clearly. I know that, you know, not only the co-op, but I mean, in fact, Unitil, for example, are in the process of building a solar array. And there's conversations at the Public Utilities Commission about allowing some of the utilities to be able to derive some of their power from their own development projects. I would like to think that a lot of our work is shining a light on some of this, and it is causing some of these initiatives to really start to take hold. And that competition that we're showing, that is, you know, you don't just take it or leave it and you'll pay any price because that's all you got as a choice, is changing things. There is nothing in the legislature at the moment that's going to fundamentally change the way the power is procured by the utilities and what their role is, because that is the cornerstone of deregulation. And so there's only a limited amount of opportunity to produce your own power, because, you know, I take Eversource, for example, you know, they had to divest themselves of all the power stations and things like that. I think, you know, what they're allowed to generate load on their own is very small proportion of the total load that they're producing. But I think it's a concept that's going to gain more conversation. I know Eversource had this grand plan to put a battery project into Fitzwilliam, I think it was, over in Cheshire. And, you know, there's a lot of trumpeting about it. Liberty, I'm not sure it's in, I know Canaan also involved at this stage. We're doing Canaan public hearings very soon. I got their information and I learned that Liberty have got 10 customers there where they were doing this very high profile battery project where they would buy you a Tesla Powerwall and you would pay it off $50 a month or something like that. I forget the deal. And it sounded like they were going to be a big game changer, except that they never got past the pilot project. And I think there's only been a handful of people that ever got their hands on this stuff. And the Fitzwilliam project all disappeared in the ether, you know. So you have to remember that, you know, we're talking about investor-owned utilities whose primary role in life is to have a guaranteed return on investment to their shareholders of over 10%. Right now, our interest rates are high, but that commitment was there when we could only get 0.1 of a cent on a CD. They were still getting 10 to 12%. And I assure you, a lot of that calculus has restricted the investment in technology that would allow you to save money. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit over my skis. You did ask.
Can I just say a couple things first? I just want to make clear, anyone is free to opt out or opt in at any point, but it wouldn't take effect till the next billing period.
Next meter reading, yeah.
So I just want people to be clear about it. So it's within 30 days.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point just to point out. So just going back to this June launch, for example, because I had a lot of this happen in October. So if you launch in a month, your meter reads are all different days of that month. So, you know, your meter read in June could be June the 28th. And that's when your meter's read, so you get a bill. So I get people saying, I haven't got my community power yet. Well, I have to explain that no, that's when you were switched, but then the next meter read on July the 28th, and the bill that comes after that, that's when you'll see community power show up. So there's a bit of a delay in the process because of meter reading is when it triggers it.
I have another option, opt-in, opt-out. So, everybody here is probably subject to this rate, the residential rate, but if you're a commercial and industrial customer, with one of the utilities, walk us through how that, does the process work any differently?
Well, in each utility does it a bit differently, but by and large, residential and small business all get charged the same rate, that 8.6 cents, or the rate from the utility. So Eversource is 10.403. In Eversource's world, if you're the next level up, so you're a medium-sized business, say you've got an auto body shop and you use a welder, and you've got to have three-phase power, and you know you're using a large amount of electricity in a short period of time, you incur what is called a demand charge. It's not kilowatt hours, it's kilowatts. I always describe it like the size of a pipe. You need a bigger pipe because you need a lot of juice. We don't get involved in the demand charge side. We get involved in the kilowatt hour side charge. But a medium-sized customer, which is GV in the world of Eversource, it's G2 in the world of Liberty, will be automatically enrolled. But if you're a large consumer, LG in G1, you would not be automatically enrolled. There's a cutoff there. I could go on, but you know, you
And
get
are
the
you
general
enrolled at
gist of it.
a separate rate than the one?
I was just about to say, yes, so when you're on default power as a GB or a G2 customer, you don't actually pay every month the same, you pay a variable monthly rate. Over the 6 months period, that shakes out to an average. The coalition, we make sure that shakes out to 8.6 cents. That's not how it's done at Eversource and Liberty. It's you pay more as a commercial customer than you do as a residential or small business customer. But we don't do that. But we do have to do the monthly billing, unless, as those who are paying attention figured out, you sign up for the new 1-year rate at 8.9 cents. So, I mean, all kidding apart, this time of year it gets expensive for small businesses, and sometimes it's attractive just to have a single flat rate across the year.
And can you just elaborate on that, the new, is that an option for everyone that they would have?
Commercial and municipal only.
Just municipal.
Well, commercial, I say commercial and municipal because in the world of electricity, municipal is commercial. It's non-residential. Yeah.
Yes, if you could keep your questions short, because we have, 8 minutes left and I want to.
I'll do this very quickly. It sounds as if the committee and the select board are committed to playing through with using the coalition as, the load serving entity. I've got that right. Is that correct? Is that the recommendation right now?
Well, can't speak for the select board. The energy committee has voted unanimously to recommend going with CPCNH to
Okay.
the select board.
Is the select board address that?
The select board is, I would say, leaning towards CPCNH. There is an alternate, option, which would be to go with a broker, but, we as a town would have, really no say in how the broker functions and operates, whereas we would have a seat at the table with CPCNH, which makes us feel good.
And will that decision be part of the warrant article?
The decision will lie with the select board.
Okay, so it's separate.
Yes.
So we're just saying go, and then you are going to make the decision.
You would be authorizing, you would be authorizing the select board to, be the purchase power for the town, and then we would either likely partner with CPCNH.
Similar question, does the committee or the select board anticipate doing any involving, Cornish in any of the projects, that the coalition might offer, or a project that begins here?
The energy committee is very interested in supporting and maybe, taking part in some actual building of solar arrays and maybe collaborating with other towns. But that's something that we couldn't, enter into or decide on probably without bringing it to town meeting, because that would involve some investment of money.
There's also a line in the agreement about the ability of the town to procure voluntary renewables in excess of RPS minimum requirements for Class 1 resources. Now, would that affect everyone in the town? If,
Can you read that again?
it's on page 13. The town may seek to procure voluntary renewables in excess of the RPS minimum requirement for Class 1 resource. Now, I know that the town is committed to its own purchases to reach a certain renewable goal by 2030.
Yes.
So that makes sense, and that's just a matter of the town deciding to go with a higher class. But is this intended to
Is that,
pertain to the whole?
can you tell me what, section, is that under our goals and objectives?
I don't have, I don't get
Okay.
this on the screen,
Okay,
so.
I mean, I would suggest that a lot of the verbiage in there about options goes back to what Joanne's saying, you know, I think it would be, I would be extremely surprised to think of the select board taking any form of elective or optional action without running it back through the legislative body.
Yeah.
I feel absolutely certain, it's been made very clear to me that the select board, you know, doesn't want to run fast and loose with this. And although, you know, it's interesting that Cornish has made its own separate declaration towards a renewables future, and we can definitely assist in that, but that would be very much a conversation I would imagine the select board will want to have. What's going to happen, just for interest, because, you know, a year ago I was talking about all this theoretically, but we didn't have much to say in terms of hard numbers. What we're doing now this fall is for the communities that have been launched for long enough, most of the ones, certainly the ones that have been operating for over a year, we're giving them an annual report. So every town is getting a report from CPCNH. We're going to get it done by the end of this month so that it can go into your town reports. And it'll say how much money was saved in the last year in Cornish and how many people opted up and yada yada. It will also be, you know, an opportunity to talk about what's next. And I would imagine that, you know, Cornish, like other communities, would launch cautiously, see how things go, and then the next year maybe take things to a new level, but not do it without the buy-in of the community. That would be a fair statement.
Yes, that's completely correct.
I found it says Cornish Community Power may seek to procure voluntary renewables, which is voluntary.
Well,
Excess of the argument.
Yeah.
Okay, we can go into this.
yeah, we can go in. We don't need to take people's valuable time tonight to get into some of those optionality conversations. Some of these were written in a way that even I couldn't explain it directly, who put that in and what they were on about. I mean, class 1 renewables is what we're all about. And it's talking about, you know, a future that can go in all sorts of different directions. None of us know what's going to happen. Things are not, you know, static. The climate is not static. Our nation is not static. How about that, bro? Okay. And, you know, we've got to navigate that. And so this is a document that won't sort of just sit on the shelf gathering dust, I hope. It's something that will be a guide and something worth referring to, you know, like your master plan and your energy goals are all about a roadmap for the future as we all navigate the need for greater reliability and sustainability.
Just to tease out a little bit more about these other options that can develop, and I don't want to confuse the basic presentation of the plan here, but over time, if the town of Cornish, for example, decided we want to build some kind of community solar project, how can we fund that? Could they, through an adder, say, you know what, rather than paying 8.6 cents the basic rate, let's add a tenth of a cent to make it 8.7, or let's add a whole penny and make it 9.6. You could have an adder, and with that money then not go to CPCNH generally, but it could be for the town of Cornish.
That's allowed.
That could fund a community project.
We introduced that. It's called a discretionary adder or reserve. This rate period, and 4 communities out of 60 adopted it. Locally, Peterborough, the city of Nashua, actually the county of Cheshire, and Canterbury, I think, was the 4th. And they all did it differently because, you know, this again is a great example. It's your plan, not our plan. And you can take this wherever you want. And what Peterborough has told me they're planning to do with this money is to initiate free energy audits. And as the money grows, to maybe fund for low income, along with like programs like New Hampshire Saves, weatherization. So lowering, do you remember that electric bill analogy? You know, lowering all the kilowatt hours to lower people's bills right across the board. I think that's a very commendable idea. We only had 4 communities that felt ready. I mean, Peterborough is one of the ones that has made some very strong commitments. Peterborough holds the record. It has at least 3 energy committees, if not 4. I'll leave that there. But my point is that they're very all in Peterborough. One of the original launch communities is Enfield. Enfield, I went to a meeting with the select board about this discretionary reserve, and the select board said, absolutely, good idea, let's ask the voters. And so it's going on the warrant article this year as to whether or not to do this, because, you know, my discretionary adder might be your tax, you know? You have to be very careful about how this is viewed. We have to either be all in or not do it. And I always caution people about, don't get too excited about all this optionality. Let's get the thing running. Let's prove its worth, and then come back and take it steady as we progress and navigate through all this. Because, you know, what we don't want to do is have any bad feeling or a sense that there's been anything done without the full support of the community.
But we could still opt out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you go around and wait, I don't like being an opt-out, it's not really the most positive way of communicating something that really is a very, very good idea. And, you know, we've got, you know, in the city of Nashua, they will accrue $500,000 because it's a big city. So there's a lot of work that can get done with that kind of money. But, you know, you just need to be careful about, you know, doing this all in a big hurry and making it go south.
So we've now reached a little past 8. So I want to remind people, if you have more questions, please feel free to email me. Do look at the web page on the Cornish website. There are a lot of frequently asked questions that might inform you more. And please tell people, please tell your neighbors about this, encourage them to come to the December 3rd public hearing. I will put the recording of this on that same information page. Have to see how good it is. You know, I started it a little late, and I'm hoping it will. But we will try to provide you with as much information as we can, and people who can't make the public hearings hopefully can watch them
We'll be able to post a slide deck on.
I think so, yes.
And there's some just a dozen copies there. So if anybody wants to take one on the way out, please do so.
This is a hard copy of the slide deck, so please feel free to take one of those. And if anyone has any concerns or ideas that they think might be helpful to other people, please let me know. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you for coming.
Hey, Joanna, good job.
I was in Northumberland on Tuesday night, which is 2.5 hours after one of these. I was like, I don't want to make it over that for you.
I know, I got a bunch of the deer.
They're the best.